"Get away from me," Lena said, pressing her coat harder against the stranger's side as blood soaked through her fingers. "I'm not leaving you here." She didn't know his name. She didn't know that half of Chicago answered to him. She only knew he was dying in an alley while everyone else kept walking. If this story moves you, subscribe to our channel and follow along until the very end. Drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. The bakery closed at 11. Lena Carter had been on her feet since 3 that afternoon, and by the time she untied her apron and switched off the last light in the back kitchen, every muscle in her lower back was making its opinion known. She pulled on her jacket, tucked the cash deposit into the inside pocket, the way her manager had shown her months ago, and pushed through the side door into the October air. Chicago in October wasn't cruel yet. It was just honest. Cold enough to remind you that warmth was something you had to earn, something you had to carry inside yourself, because the city wasn't going to offer it freely. Lena understood that. She had understood it since she was 14 years old, and her father sat her down at the kitchen table and told her that their family's protection had run out. She didn't let herself think about her father tonight. She had learned that trick over the years. Certain thoughts were like open windows in winter. You closed them quickly, or the cold got in and didn't leave. The walk home was 22 minutes if she went straight, 30 if she cut through the park and let herself breathe for a moment. Tonight, she needed the 30-minute version. Her younger brother Marcus was probably already asleep. He had a math test tomorrow, and he'd been studying since 6. He didn't need her rushing in and waking him up with the particular energy she carried after a double shift that frayed buzzing tension that came from being on her feet for 8 hours and being polite to every face that came through the door. She turned left off Caldwell and headed toward the park entrance. That was when she heard it. Not a scream. Not anything dramatic. Just a sound that didn't fit a low, rough exhale. The kind a person makes when they're trying to hold something in and can't quite manage it anymore. It came from the narrow gap between 2 buildings about 40 feet to her right. Most people would have registered it and kept moving. Most people who walked home alone at 11 at night in this part of the city had already made the calculation other people's trouble was a cost you couldn't afford. Lena stopped walking. She stood there for a full 3 seconds, doing the exact same calculation every other person on that street had done. And then, because she was who she was, she walked toward the sound. "Hello," she called, not too loud. "Is someone there?" Nothing for a moment. Then that sound again, lower this time. She reached the opening between the buildings and looked in. The light from the street didn't reach far, but it reached far enough. A man was on the ground, leaning against the wall, with one arm pressed against his left side. He was wearing clothes that didn't belong in an alley dark shirt jacket that probably cost more than Lena made in 2 weeks. His face was turned slightly away from her, and even from here, she could see that he was working hard just to stay conscious. "Hey." She moved toward him without thinking about it the way she always moved toward things she probably should have moved away from. "Hey, can you hear me? What happened?" His head turned. His eyes found her face. They were dark eyes, and even in this light, in this state, there was something in them that made her pause for just a half second. Not fear. She wasn't sure what it was. Steadiness, maybe. Like even now, even with whatever was wrong with him, some part of him was still completely in control of something she couldn't see. "Don't call anyone," he said. His voice was low but clear. No slurring, no confusion. Just an instruction delivered like a man who was accustomed to giving instructions. "You're bleeding," Lena said. "I'm aware. Seriously bleeding." "I know that." "Then you know I'm going to call 911. I said don't." Lena crouched in front of him. She could see it now. The dark spread of blood soaking through his shirt on his left side, his right hand pressed against it. She pulled off her coat without asking permission, folded it once, and pressed it firmly against the wound. He made a sound. "Hold that," she said. "I told you not to. And I'm telling you that you're going to bleed out in this alley if someone doesn't help you." She already had her phone out. "So either you let me call for help, or you try to stop me, But based on how much blood you've lost in the last 30 seconds, I don't think you're in a position to do much stopping." He said nothing for a moment. "What's your name?" she asked while the phone rang. Another silence. "Okay," she said. "You don't have to tell me." The dispatcher picked up, and Lena gave the address, kept her voice steady, kept the pressure firm with her other hand. She didn't look away from him while she talked. She watched his face, watched him watching her. And there was something happening in his expression that she couldn't quite name. Something that looked almost like surprise. He opened his mouth once like he was going to say something. Then his eyes closed. "Hey." She put the phone away and touched his face with her free hand, firm enough to get a response. "Don't do that. Stay with me. The ambulance is coming." His eyes opened again, barely. "Your coat," he said. His voice was thinner now. "I don't care about my coat. It's going to be ruined. I have another one." She didn't. "Keep your eyes open." She talked to him for the next 11 minutes. She told him about the bakery. She told him about Marcus and the math test. She told him that October in Chicago was beautiful if you knew how to dress for it, and that most people didn't know how to dress for it. She told him she'd lived on the North Side her whole life, and she still couldn't figure out how the wind came from 4 directions at once on Michigan Avenue. She kept the pressure steady, and she kept talking, and she watched his face every second, because she needed to see him staying with her. She didn't know his name. She didn't know that 3 blocks away, in 2 separate black vehicles, 8 men were looking for him, with the kind of urgency that meant someone's life depended on the outcome. She didn't know that the man leaning against the alley wall wearing a jacket that cost more than her month's rent was Adrian Morelli, and that Adrian Morelli was not a name anyone in Chicago said without lowering their voice first. She only knew what she could see. A person who needed help. The paramedics arrived with noise and light, and in the sudden brightness and movement, everything shifted. 2 of them took over from Lena with practiced efficiency. A third started asking her questions she mostly answered on autopilot. That was when she noticed the 2 men who had appeared at the mouth of the alley. They weren't paramedics. They were watching everything with the particular stillness of men who were trying to look casual and failing. One of them spoke briefly into a phone. The other's eyes moved from the injured man on the ground to Lena's face and stayed there. Something went cold in her stomach. She answered the paramedic's last question, said she didn't know the man, said she'd just found him. She retrieved her coat when one of the paramedics handed it back, thanked him, and then she walked away. Not fast enough to look like she was running. Just steady, normal steps back toward the street. She didn't look at the 2 men again. She went home, washed the blood off her hands, and sat at the kitchen table for a long time in the quiet of the apartment. She told herself it was over. She'd helped someone and left. That was all. That was the end of it. She almost believed it. Marcus was already up when she came out of her room the next morning. He was at the table with his math textbook and a bowl of cereal, and he looked up at her with the particular expression he'd inherited from their father, that slight tilt of the head that said he'd already noticed something was different, and he was deciding whether to ask about it. "You okay?" he said. "Fine," Lena said. "Just tired." "You've got that look." "What look?" "The one where something happened and you don't want to tell me because you think I'll worry." She poured herself coffee and sat across from him. Marcus was 17. He had their mother's mouth and their father's eyes. And sometimes when he looked at her like this, she felt the weight of being the person responsible for keeping him safe in a way that sat heavy across her shoulders. "Someone got hurt near the bakery last night," she said. "I helped until the ambulance came. That's all." Marcus studied her. "You stay until they took him?" "Yes." "And then you left him?" "Yes." He nodded slowly, looking back at his textbook. Dad would have done the same thing. Lena held her coffee with both hands and didn't say anything. She thought about the 2 men at the mouth of the alley. The one who had watched her face with that flat measuring look. She thought about the stranger's voice. Don't call anyone. Clear and certain, even through the pain. The voice of someone who was used to his instructions being followed. She thought about his eyes when they found her face in the dark. She pushed all of it away and finished her coffee, and asked Marcus if he needed help reviewing anything before his test. She thought about him 3 more times that day while she was working. The first time she was sliding a tray of rolls into the display case, and her hands remembered the pressure of keeping the coat against his side. The particular resistance of trying to hold something in that was trying to get out. The second time, a man came into the bakery wearing an expensive jacket. Not the same kind, different color, and for 1 second her attention sharpened before she registered that it wasn't him, couldn't be him. The man she'd found in the alley was in a hospital somewhere. The third time, near the end of her shift, she overheard 2 customers talking in the corner booth. She wasn't trying to listen. She was wiping down the counter closest to them, and they were speaking in low voices, but the counter was closer than they thought. Heard it was bad. 3 of Caruso's guys, they said. Caruso's going to push back. You know what that means. The whole north side's going to feel it. When doesn't it? The name Caruso didn't mean anything to her. Or rather, it meant something vague and distant. A name she'd heard over the years, the way you hear certain things in a city attached to rumors and whispered stories that you didn't examine too closely, because examining them too closely felt like inviting something in. She finished wiping the counter and moved to the other end of the bakery. She didn't think about the alley again until she was locking up that night. And then she thought about it hard enough that she stood outside the back door for a full minute before making herself move. On the third day, a woman came into the bakery. She was somewhere in her 50s, well-dressed, and she did not look like someone who had come in for a croissant. She walked straight to the counter where Lena was standing, set both hands flat on the glass case, and looked at her with the kind of directness that made the other customer at the far end of the shop glance over. "You're Lena Carter," the woman said. It wasn't a question. Lena felt something shift inside her chest. Not panic. Something more careful than panic. "Can I help you?" "My name is Rosa Luca," the woman said. "I work for a man you helped 3 nights ago. He asked me to come." Lena kept her expression still. She was good at that. She had learned to be good at it over years of holding things together in situations where falling apart wasn't something she could afford. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Rosa Luca's voice wasn't unkind. It was simply honest. "He wants to thank you, that's all. No obligation, no expectation. He simply wanted you to know that you saved his life and that he is grateful. He doesn't need to thank me. He knows that. He wants to anyway." Lena studied this woman across the glass counter. Rosa Luca met her gaze without flinching, without looking away. There was something in her face that Lena couldn't quite read, not threat, not manipulation, but something weighted, something that carried the particular quality of a message that mattered. "How did you find me?" Lena asked. "He has resources." That's not an answer. It's the honest one. Lena was quiet for a moment. "Who is he?" Rosa Luca held her gaze. "His name is Adrian Morelli." The counter between them suddenly felt very thin. Lena knew that name. She had heard that name exactly twice in her life, and both times it had been connected to something that changed the shape of things. The first time she was 16 and overhearing her father on the phone, his voice strange and tight in a way she hadn't understood then. The second time she was 20, and someone told her about the deal that her father had been accused of breaking, the deal that had destroyed his reputation, and eventually, by the slow grinding weight of it, destroyed him. Adrian Morelli. She kept her face exactly where it was. "Tell him I don't need his thanks," she said. Rosa Luca did not move. "He thought you might say that." "Then we're done here." "He also asked me to give you this." Rosa reached into her jacket pocket and set an envelope on the glass case. "You don't have to open it, you don't have to do anything, but he asked me to leave it." Lena didn't touch the envelope. Rosa Luca straightened, smoothed her jacket, and looked at Lena for a moment with that same expression that carried more than it showed. "He said to tell you that your coat was the first thing someone had given him in a long time that wasn't given to get something back." Then she walked out. Lena stood behind the counter for a long time. The other customer had left. The bakery was quiet. Outside, the October light was going flat and gray, the particular gray that comes before the clouds decide what they're going to do. She looked at the envelope on the glass case. She picked it up. Inside the envelope was a single card. No printed letterhead. Handwritten in ink that pressed hard enough into the cardstock that she could feel the lines with her thumb. The handwriting was controlled, precise, the kind of handwriting that came from someone who was deliberate about small things. Your coat is being replaced. The cleaner said it was beyond repair. This is not a payment. It is a recognition that you lost something you shouldn't have had to lose. If you have questions, Rosa has a number. A.M. Below that in smaller letters. Your father was Daniel Carter. He worked for the Morelli logistics operation from 2009 to 2014. I know what happened to him. I did not know the truth then. I know it now. If you want to talk about it, I would understand if you don't. Lena read the card twice. Then she sat down on the stool behind the counter because her legs made the decision for her before she could make it herself. Daniel Carter. Her father. She had spent 6 years carrying the weight of what happened to him, not the official version, the one that circulated in certain conversations, and made people lower their eyes when they saw Lena coming. The version that said Daniel Carter had made a deal he shouldn't have made, had talked to people he shouldn't have talked to, had broken faith with a man whose faith was not something you broke. She had spent 6 years knowing that version was wrong. She had no proof. She had her father's voice the last time she saw him, 3 months before he died, telling her, I didn't do what they said I did, Lena. I want you to know that. I need you to know that. His hands shaking slightly, not from guilt, but from something else. Exhaustion, maybe, or the particular kind of sorrow that comes from seeing what you believed in revealed as something else entirely. She had believed him. She had believed him for 6 years with no evidence and no one who would listen. And now the envelope on the counter was telling her that the man who ran the organization that had destroyed her father was in a hospital somewhere, recovering because she had stayed when everyone else walked past. She didn't know what she felt. She sat in the empty bakery for a long time, holding the card. Then she took out her phone and called the number Rosa had given her. It rang twice. Miss Carter. The voice was different from when she'd last heard it, steadier, fuller, the particular quality of someone no longer running on borrowed time. But she recognized it. She would have recognized it anywhere. You could have told me your name, she said. In the alley. A pause. Would it have changed what you did? No. That's what I thought. Is that why you didn't tell me? I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure you'd stay. Another pause, shorter. Which tells you more about the world I live in than anything else I could say. Lena pressed her back against the stool. The card says you know what happened to my father. Yes. How long have you known? The pause this time was longer. Long enough that the silence had weight. 4 months. 4 months. 4 months, she repeated. Yes. And in 4 months you didn't... She stopped. She pressed her hand flat on the counter. What did you know? Tell me specifically what you know. Not on the phone. His voice was careful now. Careful in the way of someone who had spent years understanding which words were safe in which places. I'll tell you everything. In person. But not on the phone. You want me to come to you? I want to tell you the truth about your father, he said. I understand if you don't want to hear it from me. I understand if you don't want to be in the same room with me. I understand if you want nothing to do with me or anyone connected to me. I'm not asking you to forgive anything. I'm offering you information you deserve to have. Lena was quiet for a long time. She looked at the door of the bakery, the window where the October gray had deepened into actual evening. Where, she said.
Now to where?
She went the next afternoon. She told Marcus she had an errand. She wore the good coat she saved for job interviews and city hall meetings, not because she wanted to look impressive, but because she needed the armor of something that felt solid. She took the address Rosa had texted her, and she walked in. And the walk itself was a kind of decision she had been making her whole life, the decision to move toward the thing that frightened her instead of away from it, because the alternative was living in the shadow of something you never faced. The building didn't look like what she expected. It looked like a private medical facility, clean and quiet, the kind of place where floors were polished and voices were kept low, and the people who moved through the halls did so with the particular efficiency of people who understood that time had specific costs. A man she'd never met held a door for her and said her name and led her down a corridor without being asked. She was shown into a room that looked less like a hospital room and more like a very sparse office that happened to have a bed in it. He was sitting up when she walked in, not lying down. He was wearing a dark shirt, no jacket, his left side still clearly carrying the aftermath of what had happened. He looked in the plain light of the room, like someone who was used to looking like nothing had happened, and was finding that harder than usual. He looked at her. She stopped inside the door. "You came," he said. "I want to know about my father," she said. "That's why I'm here." "I know." She didn't sit. She stood inside the door with her coat buttoned and her hands at her sides, and she looked at him the way she had looked at him in the alley, straight on, no performance of anything. "Tell me," she said. And he did. She had expected a version she could argue with. She had spent 6 years constructing counter-arguments against the story that had been told about her father, and she had been prepared to stack those arguments against whatever he offered. She had been prepared to fight for every inch of the truth. Adrian Morelli didn't give her a version to argue with. He gave her documents, not just his Word documents. Physical paper in a folder that Rosa brought in and set on the edge of the bed beside him. Financial records, communications, a log of meetings that Daniel Carter had attended in 2013 and early 2014. A summary of information that had been fed to the Morelli organization through a source that Adrian said, with a particular flatness in his voice, he had trusted completely. "Someone told you my father was a traitor," Lena said. She was holding a page of the financial records, not reading it anymore, just holding it. "Someone with access." "Yes." "And you believed them?" "I did." He didn't look away when he said it. "I had no reason not to at the time. The evidence was constructed carefully. It was constructed by someone who understood exactly what I would need to see in order to believe it." "Who?" "A man named Vincent Stahl." Adrian watched her face. "He ran a consulting operation that worked with several organizations, including mine. He had been inside my operation for 9 years. He was careful. He was patient. He used my trust against me in a way that took me years to understand." "Why would he frame my father?" "Because your father knew something." Adrian set down the folder. In late 2013, Daniel Carter found evidence that Stahl was operating a separate arrangement on the side, running money through channels he had no business touching, creating agreements with people who were supposed to be entirely outside his reach. Your father documented it. He was building a case to bring to me. Lena's hands tightened on the page. "He never brought it to you?" "No. Because Stahl found out first." Adrian's voice was level, careful. The voice of someone delivering information they had processed many times alone before saying it aloud. "Stahl moved first. He poisoned the record. Made it look like the evidence your father was collecting was actually evidence of your father's own dealings. By the time I heard anything, the story was already built. And my father was already gone." He held her gaze. "I'm not going to tell you there was nothing I could have done differently. There was. I should have investigated longer. I should have pushed harder on the source. I was given information, and I accepted it. And I am telling you now that accepting it was a mistake that I have to carry." The room was very quiet. Lena set the page back in the folder. She stood very still for a moment, and she let herself feel what she was feeling, which was large and complicated, and had been waiting for 6 years to be felt properly. It wasn't just relief. It wasn't just grief. It was both at once and something else underneath them, something that felt like the particular vertigo of a floor you've been standing on, turning out to be a different floor than you thought. "He told me he didn't do it," she said. Her voice was steady. She had decided it would be. The last time I saw him. He told me he needed me to know he didn't do it. He didn't. He spent the last years of his life with people thinking he had. Yes. She looked at him. And you're telling me now because I saved your life. I'm telling you now because 4 months ago I found out the truth, and I didn't know how to find you. His voice changed slightly, not softer, but more deliberate, like he was saying something he had thought about enough times that he needed to be precise. When my people found you after the alley, I understood who your father was. I understood what that meant. I didn't know how to bring you the truth in a way that wasn't. He stopped, started again. I didn't want it to look like a transaction, like I was paying a debt. It's not a transaction, Lena said. No. It's the truth. Yes. She picked up her bag. She stood at the foot of the bed holding the folder of documents, and she looked at him one more time. He was watching her with that same quality she'd noticed in the alley, that steadiness, that particular attention, like she was something he was working very hard to understand. I'm going to want copies of everything, she said. They're already made. And I'm going to want the name of whoever can corroborate this, someone outside your organization. I'll have Rosa send you the contact information by tonight. Lena nodded. She moved toward the door. Ms. Carter. She stopped. Your father, Adrian said, spent 2 years trying to do the right thing inside a world that punished people for doing the right thing. That's not a small thing. I want you to know that I understand that now. Lena stood with her hand on the doorframe. She thought about her father at the kitchen table telling her he needed her to know. She thought about 6 years. It took you long enough, she said, and she walked out. What? She sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks away for 2 hours. She spread the documents on the table in front of her and read every page, not skimming reading, every line, every figure, every name. She had spent 6 years without evidence, and now she had it laid out in front of her in a coffee shop, while someone at the next table argued with their phone about a delivery order. The evidence was solid. She was not a lawyer, and she was not an investigator. But she was someone who had worked jobs that required reading carefully and thinking carefully and not accepting the first version of anything. And she read these documents and she understood that they were real. Her father had been protecting innocent people. He had seen something he shouldn't have seen, and instead of walking away from it, instead of protecting himself, he had spent 2 years carefully building the case for someone who was supposed to be worth trusting. He had done the right thing inside a world designed to punish people for doing the right thing, and it had cost him everything. She thought about who had known. She thought about Vincent Stahl, a name she had never heard before today, a man who had moved through her father's story like a shadow she hadn't known to look for. She thought about the fact that Adrian Morelli had known the truth for 4 months. 4 months was a long time. She understood what he'd said about not wanting it to look like a transaction. She understood the logic of it. But she also felt the weight of those 4 months, the specific accumulation of days during which she had still been carrying the version that was wrong. She gathered the documents back into the folder. She thought, what do I do with this? Not just with the information, with all of it. With the fact that the man who owed her father the most in the way of justice was the same man she had kept alive with her coat in an alley on a Tuesday night. With the fact that she had looked into his eyes and made a choice, and she still believed it was the right choice. She finished her coffee. She went home to Marcus. She didn't tell him everything, not yet. Some things needed to settle before you spoke them out loud. Some things needed to become solid enough that the words for them existed. She set the folder in the back of her closet behind the things she didn't look at every day. She went to sleep. She lay in the dark for a long time, and she thought about her father's voice. I need you to know that. She thought about what it had cost him to say that, what it had cost him to hold that for as long as he did. She thought about Adrian Morelli sitting in that room saying I should have investigated longer. There was something I could have done differently. She thought about the particular difficulty of people telling the truth when it was easier not to. She thought, not yet. Not done yet. And she let herself sleep. She didn't go back. That was the decision she made in the dark on the night she came home from that room, from that conversation, from the folder of documents that confirmed everything her father had ever asked her to believe about him. She made the decision clearly, without drama, the way she made most of her significant decisions alone, quietly with her hands flat on the mattress, and the apartment building, making its small nighttime sounds around her. She was done with Adrian Morelli. She had the truth about her father. She had the documents. She had the name Vincent Stahl written in ink on paper she could hold. That was enough. That was more than she had carried into yesterday, and the transaction the word he himself had been careful not to use was complete. She was a bakery worker with a 17-year-old brother and a dream of becoming a social worker that she had been pursuing one community college credit at a time for 3 years. She was not someone who entered the orbit of men like Adrian Morelli and walked back out clean. So, she was done. She believed that completely for 4 days. On the 5th day, Rosa Luca came back. Not to the bakery this time. Rosa came to the community center on Ashland where Lena volunteered 2 evenings a week, running homework help for middle schoolers whose parents worked nights. Lena came out of the side room where she'd been helping a 12-year-old named Destiny through long division, and Rosa was sitting in one of the plastic chairs by the front door, wearing the same kind of careful, well-constructed composure as before, except that something in her eyes was different. Lena stopped walking. "How did you know I was here?" she said. "I know most things," Rosa said. "May I speak with you?" "If this is about him." "It is." Rosa stood. She was shorter than Lena remembered from the bakery. "But not the way you think. He didn't send me." Lena studied her. "Then who sent you?" "I sent myself." Rosa held her gaze without wavering. "Because there's something you need to know that he won't tell you, and I've worked for Adrian Morelli for 19 years, and I know the difference between things he doesn't tell people because he's protecting himself and things he doesn't tell people because he thinks he's protecting them." The front room of the community center was mostly empty, a teenager by the water fountain, a woman on the far side filling out paperwork. Lena walked to the door and held it open. Rosa followed her out into the evening. "Talk," Lena said. "Vincent Stahl knows about you." Everything in Lena's chest went very still. "He's known for about 2 weeks," Rosa said. "When Adrian started pulling the thread on what actually happened to your father, he wasn't quiet enough about it. Stahl still has people inside. Not many Adrian's been cutting them out one by one since he identified the leak, but enough. Enough to know that Adrian found Daniel Carter's daughter and brought her in." Lena leaned against the wall of the building. "What does Stahl want with me?" "The same thing he's wanted with every person who got close to the truth about him." Rosa's voice was even. "He wants to understand how much you know and whether you're a problem." "I'm a bakery worker. You're Daniel Carter's daughter, and your father built a case file that Stahl has been trying to locate for 10 years. A physical file. Documents your father assembled and hid before Stahl destroyed his reputation." Rosa watched Lena's face. "Stahl doesn't know for certain that it exists. But he suspects. And now he knows there's someone who might know where it is." Lena didn't say anything. The evening air was cold, that particular cold that came off the lake and found the places where your jacket didn't quite cover. "My father never mentioned a file," Lena said. "Are you sure?" She was quiet. She thought about her father at the kitchen table, the way he'd held her gaze and said, "I didn't do what they said I did. I want you to know that. I need you to know that." She thought about the last time she'd been inside his apartment 2 months before he died. The way he'd moved around the small space with the particular care of someone who had reduced everything in their life down to what mattered and was protecting it. She thought about the photograph he'd given her. "Rosa," she said. "Yes." "Why are you here? Not what are you telling me? Why are you here? If Stahl knows about me, that's Adrian's problem to manage. It's not mine. I didn't go looking for any of this." "You're right," Rosa said. "It isn't your problem. You saved his life in an alley, and you deserve to walk away from everything that comes with knowing his name." She paused. "But walking away doesn't make the problem stop existing. Stahl's people were watching the building the day you came in. They have your face. They know you met with Adrian. Whether you choose to be involved or not, from Stahl's perspective, you already are." Lena closed her eyes for 1 second. Just one. "Stahl doesn't know Adrian found you by tracking the woman who helped him in the alley," Rosa continued. "Stahl's people think Adrian reached out to you because of your father's file, because Adrian already knew about the file and was using you to get to it. And that means, as long as Stahl believes that he's going to keep eyes on you." Rosa let that settle. "Adrian wanted to protect you by keeping you out of it, but keeping you out of it only works if Stahl doesn't already know you're in it, and he does." Lena pushed off the wall. She walked 2 steps away, turned back. "You said Adrian doesn't know you came here." "He doesn't." "What would he say if he did?" Rosa's expression shifted, something small and precise. The expression of someone who had spent 19 years reading one person very carefully. "He would be angry with me," she said. "He would say you had the right to make an informed choice about your own safety, and that it wasn't my place." She held Lena's gaze. "And he would be right. But you came anyway." "I came anyway." Lena thought about that. "The photograph," she said almost to herself. Rosa went very still. "What?" "My father gave me a photograph. About a year before he died." Lena looked at Rosa. "He made it into a big deal. He framed it himself. He brought it to me in person on a Tuesday, which was unusual because we usually talked on the phone on Tuesdays. He brought it over and he hung it on my wall, and he said, 'This is so you don't forget what we're fighting for.' He said it like it was a joke, but my father didn't make jokes about fighting." Rosa was completely still. "You think," Lena stopped, "you think he hid something in the frame?" "I think," Rosa said carefully, "that your father was a man who understood that information needed somewhere safe to live. And I think if he had built a case file that could bring down Vincent Stahl, he would have wanted someone he trusted to be able to find it." Lena looked at her for a long moment. Then she turned and walked toward the street. "Where are you going?" Rosa called. "Home," Lena said. "I need to look at a photograph." Marcus was at practice. She had 40 minutes alone in the apartment, which was exactly enough time to take the photograph off the wall of her bedroom, the photograph her father had brought on a Tuesday and hung himself while she stood behind him. Saying it looked fine where it was, she didn't need it moved, and sit down on the edge of the bed with it in her hands. It was a picture of the two of them, her father and Lena, maybe 8 years old, at a summer fair somewhere. He was holding a ridiculous stuffed bear he'd won at one of the ring toss games. She was laughing at something off camera. She'd always loved this photograph because of her own expression in it, the pure openness of it, the kind of laugh that children have before they learn to moderate everything. She turned it over. The backing was ordinary cardboard, the kind that came with cheap frames held in by 4 small metal tabs bent inward. She bent them back carefully, one at a time. The cardboard came away. Behind it was a second piece of cardboard, and behind that, folded twice, was a piece of paper. She sat very still for a moment. Then she unfolded it. It was a single page, dense with numbers and dates, handwritten in her father's careful hand. Across the top, in the same handwriting, "For when it matters. DC." Below the numbers, a note. "The account trails lead to Harmon Consulting, LLC Stahl's Shell. The dates of transfer align with the losses traced to the Morelli operation in Q3 2013. The third column is the routing that was used to make it look like mine. If you're reading this, I didn't make it far enough. Take it to someone who can finish what I started." Lena's hands were completely steady. She had always wondered about that, why she didn't shake in moments like this, why the biggest revelations came to her in stillness rather than in pieces. She thought it was because her body understood something that her mind had to catch up to. Her body had been waiting for this, had been waiting since the last time she saw her father, and he held her gaze and needed her to know. She folded the paper back exactly as it had been. She put the photograph back together, bent the tabs back in, hung it back on the wall. Then she called Rosa's number. "I found something," she said when Rosa answered. "Not on the phone, in person." "When?" "Tonight. Now, if you can." A brief pause. "Where?" "Not the building. Somewhere else." Rosa gave her an address. A restaurant North Side Small. She said to come in and ask for the table in the back corner. Lena left a note for Marcus, saying she'd be back by 9, grabbed her coat and the photograph from the wall. She wasn't leaving it here now, not with what she knew was behind it, and she went. The back corner of the restaurant was private enough that the conversation wouldn't carry. Rosa was already there, sitting with her hands around a cup of coffee, and there was something in her face when Lena walked in that said she had been sitting with this longer than tonight, longer than the conversation outside the community center. There was a weariness there that went deep, the kind that came from carrying knowledge for a long time, in a world where carrying knowledge had costs. Lena sat down. She set the photograph on the table between them. "He wrote down everything," she said. "Account numbers, routing information, dates, the name of the shell company." She held Rosa's gaze. "He said, 'Take it to someone who can finish what I started.'" Rosa looked at the photograph for a long moment without touching it. "You understand what this means," Rosa said. "It means my father was right, and Stahl destroyed him anyway. It means Stahl has been looking for this specific document for 10 years. Rosa raised her eyes to Lena's. "And now you have it. And Stahl's people saw you walk into that building." "So what do we do?" Lena asked. Rosa shook her head slightly. "I need to tell Adrian." "I thought you came to me without telling him." "I did, because I wanted you to have the choice." Rosa set her cup down. "But this changes the situation. This isn't about protecting you from the politics of who knows what. This is about a document that can end Vincent Stahl. Adrian needs to know it exists." Lena thought about the feeling she'd had walking out of the room where Adrian sat with his folder of documents and his controlled voice delivering a truth that had taken 6 years to arrive. The feeling of something that wasn't finished. The feeling of a sentence that hadn't reached its period yet. "Call him," she said. Rosa called. She said very little on the phone, just that there was a development, and she needed him to hear it from Lena directly, and that she understood he would have things to say to her about the choices she'd made tonight, and she was prepared to hear them. Then she set the phone on the table and looked at Lena. "He's coming here." Lena nodded. She ordered coffee she didn't particularly want and waited. He came in 22 minutes. He wasn't alone. 2 men stayed near the front, positioned with the particular practiced casualness of people whose job was to look like they weren't positioned anywhere. Adrian came to the back corner and sat down across from Lena and looked at Rosa with an expression that said the conversation between them was not finished, was in fact barely started, and then he looked at Lena. "She shouldn't have come to you without my knowledge," he said. "She probably saved me from making a very bad, uninformed decision," Lena said, "which is more than I can say for anyone else in this situation." Something moved through his expression. He looked at Rosa. "We'll discuss this later." "I expect so," Rosa said without particular concern. He turned back to Lena. "What did you find?" She told him about the photograph. She didn't give him the document, not yet. Not here, but she told him what was in it. The account numbers, the routing, the name, Harmon Consulting. She told him the dates aligned with what he already knew. She told him her father had written it by hand on a single page and folded it behind a photograph of a stuffed bear at a summer fair, because he had understood that the safest places were the ones that looked like nothing. Adrian listened to all of it without moving, without his expression shifting more than a fraction. But she was watching him the way she'd learned to watch people over years of working jobs that required reading faces. She watched the line of his jaw, the quality of his attention, the thing that happened around his eyes when she said the name Harmon Consulting. She saw him recognize it. She saw what recognition looked like on a face that was very practiced at not showing what it knew. "Harmon Consulting," he said. "You've heard it. It's a name I've been trying to confirm for 4 months. His voice had a particular controlled quality, the voice of someone who had learned that anger in certain rooms was a liability. Every time we pulled a thread, it disappeared. The structure was designed to be difficult to trace. He looked at her. Your father traced it. In 2013. In 2013. He said it quietly, like the weight of the year itself was something he was holding. He tried to bring it to you, Lena said. He spent 2 years building a case for you. I know. And Stahl got there first. I know that too. The restaurant was quiet around them. Outside, the city moved in its ordinary way, the particular obliviousness of a city that contained enormous things and mostly didn't know. What happens with the document? Lena asked. If it's what you're describing, Adrian said, it's enough to take to federal authorities. Not just enough, more than enough. Stahl has been operating his shell structure for 15 years. Your father's documentation links the 2013 activity to the current structure. It closes a loop that's been open for a decade. Federal authorities, Lena said. Yes. Are you comfortable with that? He met her gaze directly. I'm not comfortable with anything about this situation, he said. But I'm more comfortable with that than with the alternative, which is leaving Vincent Stahl operational. His voice was flat. He's already made it clear he's watching you. He'll keep watching you. As long as he believes you have something he wants or can lead him to it, you're a variable he's going to want to eliminate. The word landed in the quiet between them. Eliminate. I'm a bakery worker, Lena said. You're the woman who has the document that can end him. Adrian didn't soften it. She had already found out that he didn't soften things unnecessarily, that his version of respect was to give you the actual truth. I'm sorry. I wish I had found you before Stahl's people saw you come in. I made decisions that... He stopped. I moved too slowly because I was trying to be careful about how I approached you, and that gave Stahl a window. Lena thought about 4 months. The 4 months she'd spent still carrying the wrong version of her father's story while Adrian was pulling threads and being careful about how he approached her. You need to let me be angry about that, she said. Not right now, but at some point. Yes, he said. You're right. Good. She picked up the photograph from the table. And you need to understand that this document is my father's. It's his work. Whatever happens with it, I'm not a messenger, and I'm not a delivery mechanism. I'm deciding what to do with it. He looked at her for a moment. I understand that. Do you? Yes, he said. And then with a quality in his voice she hadn't heard before. Your father is the reason I'm sitting here right now. Not because he built a case file, because he chose to do the right thing when doing the right thing meant losing everything. That's not nothing to me. A beat. That's everything to me, actually. Lena set the photograph back on the table. She thought about her father. The summer fair, the stuffed bear, the laugh caught by someone's camera and frozen and carried forward into a Tuesday when he brought it to her and hung it on her wall and said, "This is so, you don't forget what we're fighting for." He had known. He had known she might need it. She pressed her fingers flat against the photograph for 1 second. Tell me what you need, she said. What Adrian needed, what the situation needed, was a meeting with a specific federal contact. A woman named Agent Carver, who had been building a financial crimes case for 3 years, and had been missing exactly the kind of anchor documentation that a single handwritten page in a photograph frame could provide. Adrian explained this carefully, in the measured way he explained everything, and Rosa sat beside him and added detail when he left gaps, and Lena listened to all of it and asked the questions that needed asking. Agent Carver, Lena said. She knows about you. She knows about my operation, yes. And she's still willing to work with you. We have an arrangement that's been productive for both of us. What does she get? Stahl, he said simply. She's wanted Stahl for longer than I have. His structure has crossed into federal territory in ways that make him her problem as much as mine. Lena looked at Rosa. Is this real, the federal angle? It's the safest way to end this, Rosa said. If Stahl goes down through official channels with federal documentation, it's permanent. He can't rebuild from prison. And if it's handled any other way, then it never really ends. Rosa held her gaze. This is the way that ends it. Your father understood that. It's why he built a documented case instead of taking any other kind of action. Lena sat with that. Her father had chosen the slow, careful, risky way. The way that depended on someone being willing to receive what he was building. He had chosen documentation over retaliation because he understood that retaliation left things standing and documentation brought them down. And he had hidden the documentation in a photograph of the two of them laughing at a summer fair and waited for someone to read what he'd left. Set up the meeting with Agent Carver, Lena said. Are you sure? Adrian asked. She looked at him. My father spent 2 years building something he never got to deliver. I'm going to deliver it. She stood, picked up the photograph, tucked it under her arm. And then I'm going to go back to my life. He nodded. She moved to go. Ms. Carter. His voice stopped her. She turned. What you did, he said in the alley, staying when everyone else walked past. I've thought about it a great deal in the past 2 weeks. He paused. Nobody taught you to do that. Nobody required it of you. You just did it. Because it was the right thing and you were the person standing there. Someone has to be, Lena said. Most people decide it isn't them. She met his gaze. Most people are wrong. She walked to the front of the restaurant. One of the 2 men near the door moved slightly. She went around him without looking at him, pushed through the door, and went out into the night. Her hands, she noticed, were still steady. They were always steady when it mattered. She thought that must have come from her father, too. Marcus noticed. She didn't tell him anything, but Marcus at 17 was sharp in the particular way of kids who had been paying close attention to survival since before they had words for it. He noticed the photograph was off the wall for 2 hours. He noticed she came home from her errand, with it tucked under her arm, and went straight to her room to hang it back up. He noticed that she sat across from him at dinner and asked him about his day with the careful attention of someone who was very deliberately not thinking about something else. He waited until after dinner, after she'd washed the dishes, and he'd dried them, and then he leaned against the counter and looked at her. Whatever you're dealing with, he said, you can tell me. It's fine, Marcus. You've been saying it's fine since I was 12, and I know what it actually means. She turned to face him. He was tall now, taller than her by 4 inches, with the particular upright quality of a kid who had decided early on that the world was worth standing straight for. He looked at her with their father's eyes, that same combination of patience and absolute refusal to be fooled. I found something that belonged to Dad, she said. Something important. I'm handling it. Marcus was quiet for a moment. The kind of important that means you need to be careful. Yes. Are you being careful? I'm doing my best. He nodded slowly. He pushed off the counter and picked up the dish towel again and finished drying a glass. If it gets to the point where being careful isn't enough, he said, you have to tell me. I'm not 12 anymore. I know. Dad used to do the same thing. Protect me from things by pretending they were fine. She felt something shift in her chest. Marcus, I'm just saying. He set the glass in the cabinet, turned to look at her again. We don't have anyone else. So, whatever it is, we deal with it together. Okay. She looked at her younger brother, at the particular steadiness of him, the way he had grown into someone who understood that hard things were worth walking toward, and she thought, he is exactly what Dad would have wanted. Okay, she said. She didn't tell him everything. Not yet. But she told him something. She told him that their father had been right, that the story everyone had believed about Daniel Carter was wrong, that she had proof, and that she was in the process of making sure the proof went somewhere it could matter. Marcus stood very still while she talked. When she finished, he didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, I knew it. I know. I've always known it. Me too. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. She watched his jaw work, watched him do the thing that men of all ages did when they were trying to keep something large from coming out in an inconvenient place. Then he looked back at her, and his eyes were bright and determined, and he said, "Okay, what do we do?" "Right now," Lena said. "Tonight, you study for your chemistry test, and I'm going to figure out the next step. And then we make sure Dad's work doesn't stay in a photograph forever." Marcus nodded. He was quiet for another moment. Then he said, "He would have liked that. He always said the worst thing you could do was let the truth go to waste." Lena smiled. It was a real one, the kind that didn't always come easily, but came when it was supposed to. "Yeah," she said. "He did say that." She went to her room and sat on the bed with her phone and looked at Rosa's number for a long time. She thought about Agent Carver and federal channels and the meeting Adrian had described. She thought about the handwritten page folded behind a photograph, her father's careful handwriting pressing into the paper with the particular force of someone who needed what they were writing to last. She thought about the alley. She thought about the moment she heard the sound and stopped walking when everyone else kept going. She had not known then, not even slightly, not even in the back part of her mind where she kept the things she didn't look at directly, that stopping would bring her here. You stopped, she thought. You stopped and you stayed. And now, here she was. She opened her phone and typed a message to Rosa. "I'm ready for the meeting. Tell me when." She set the phone down. From the other room, she could hear Marcus opening his chemistry textbook. The particular small sounds of a 17-year-old who had just been handed something enormous and was doing his absolute best to act like a person who could hold it. He was doing a pretty good job. She thought their father would have thought so too. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling and let herself stay in the moment for just 1 minute, not planning, not calculating, just existing in the specific shape of what her life had become in the past 2 weeks. The alley. The blood. The stranger's voice. The folder of documents. The photograph. The handwriting. For when it matters. DC. "I've got it, Dad," she said quietly to the ceiling of her room, to the photograph on the wall, to whoever might be listening in whatever place held the people who were gone, but not finished. "I've got it." Rosa's reply came at 6:47 the next morning. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. I'll send the address by 9. Lena read it twice, set the phone face down on the nightstand, and lay there for exactly 3 minutes before she got up. She had never been someone who could lie in bed with something large sitting on her chest and pretend she might still fall back asleep. Her father had been the same way. Her mother used to say the two of them were wired wrong, that normal people could sleep through things. Lena had always thought normal people just had fewer things to sleep through. She made coffee and stood in the kitchen in the early quiet and thought about Agent Carver. She thought about what it meant to walk into a room with a federal agent and put her father's handwritten page on a table and say, "This is what he found. This is what it cost him. And here is the name of the man who made sure it cost him everything." She thought about the fact that she had never in her life done anything that could be described as operating near the edge of what law enforcement would call a sensitive situation. She had gone to community college. She had worked bakery shifts. She had helped kids with long division on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. She thought, and yet here she was, coffee in hand, waiting for an address. Marcus came out of his room at 7:15, saw her face, and poured himself a bowl of cereal without saying anything. They ate in companionable silence, the specific silence of two people who had said enough the night before and were now simply existing in the same space, which was its own kind of communication. He left for school at 7:45. At the door he stopped and turned back. "You're going to do something today," he said. "Tomorrow," she said. "Meeting tomorrow." He nodded. "Be careful." "I will." "I mean it, Lena. Not your usual definition of careful. Actual careful." She looked at him. "What's my usual definition?" "Careful as long as someone needs help, and then not careful at all." She didn't argue with that because she couldn't. The address came at 8:53. A building downtown, the kind of address that didn't explain itself. No business name, just a floor number. Lena wrote it down on paper, not in her phone, and then she went to work and did her shift, and she was polite to every customer, and she let the ordinary hours carry her through to the other side of the day. She did not let herself think too hard about the fact that Rosa had also said in a follow-up message sent at 8:54, "Don't come alone. Bring the document. And Lena, if anyone approaches you between now and tomorrow morning, call me immediately." She worked her shift. She came home. She made dinner. She helped Marcus run through his chemistry notes, and she was present for all of it, fully present, the way her father had taught her to be present, even when things were pulling at you from outside. You're here, so be here. The other thing will still be the other thing when you get back to it. She slept. She almost surprised herself with how completely she slept. The building was the kind that had a lobby attendant who looked at you with the particular calibrated expression of someone whose job required them to assess everyone who walked in and make that assessment invisible. Lena gave her name. He checked something, nodded, and directed her to an elevator. She went up to the 14th floor with the photograph tucked under her arm and the folded document in the inside pocket of her good coat. Adrian was already there, so was Rosa. And a woman Lena had not met sitting on the far side of a table with a legal pad and a coffee cup, and the specific contained energy of someone who was extremely good at their job and had been in this kind of room before. She was somewhere in her mid-40s, dark hair going silver at the temples, and she looked at Lena when she walked in with the focused, unhurried attention of a person who had learned long ago that the first 30 seconds of looking at someone told you most of what you needed. "Ms. Carter," the woman said. "I'm Agent Diane Carver. Thank you for coming." Lena sat down. She set the photograph on the table. "Thank you for meeting with me." Agent Carver looked at the photograph for a moment without touching it. Then she looked at Adrian. "You've briefed her on how this works." "She's aware of the parameters," Adrian said. "I'd like to hear it from her." Lena looked at Agent Carver directly. "You've been building a financial crimes case against Vincent Stahl for approximately 3 years. Your case has gaps that require an anchor document, something that ties the shell structure to specific transactions, in a window your existing evidence doesn't fully cover. My father built that documentation in 2013 and was discredited before he could deliver it. I have what he built. You want it. In exchange, you commit to pursuing Stahl through federal channels, which protects me and my brother from retaliation and provides official exoneration of my father's record." A brief silence. "She's aware of the parameters," Rosa said with something in her voice that was possibly the closest Rosa ever came to amusement. Agent Carver looked at Lena with something that might have been respect in a different kind of room. "The exoneration of your father's record is not something I can unilaterally guarantee," she said. "What I can guarantee is that if the documentation is what you describe, it will be entered into the official record in a way that makes the truth of Daniel Carter's actions part of the permanent legal file. That's as close to official exoneration as my authority can get you." "That's enough," Lena said. "You're sure?" "My father didn't need a ceremony. He needed to be right." She held Agent Carver's gaze. He was right. Making that part of the official record is enough. Agent Carver nodded. She opened a folder on the table in front of her. "Let's see what he built." Lena reached into her coat and took out the folded page and set it on the table. Agent Carver looked at it for a long moment before she picked it up. Then she unfolded it carefully and read it. She read it once. Then she read it again, and the second time she was slower, which meant the first time had surprised her enough that she needed to make sure she was reading what she thought she was reading. She set it down. She looked at Adrian. "Harmon Consulting," she said. "Yes," he said. "We've been circling Harmon for 18 months. "I know. Your father—" She looked at Lena. "He traced it in 2013, with manually assembled records, without any of the tools we have access to." "He was very thorough," Lena said. "Ms. Carter, this isn't just thorough. Agent Carver put her hand flat on the table beside the document, not touching it, just beside it. This is the bridge. This specific routing, these specific dates, they connect the 2013 activity to a pattern of transfers we've been documenting for the past 2 years. Your father found the original structure before Stahl had a chance to bury it completely. She paused. He essentially handed us the foundation that everything else was built on. The room was quiet. Lena looked at the document on the table. Her father's handwriting, his careful numbers, his dates, 2 years of work that had disappeared into a frame behind a photograph of a stuffed bear at a summer fair. "Good," she said quietly. Her voice was steady. She had known it would be. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Agent Carver asked questions, precise, detailed procedural questions, and Lena answered everything she could and said clearly when she reached the edge of what she knew. Adrian answered his own set of questions, and Lena watched him in those moments with the particular attention she had developed for watching him, the way she had learned to read the controlled surface of him for what moved underneath it. He was careful, but he was not evasive. When Agent Carver pushed into territory that was difficult, the history of the Morelli operation, specific names, specific decisions, he answered directly, and he did not look for exits. Lena noticed that. She noticed it the way you notice things about people when you're not sure yet what to make of them. She kept a running account, a kind of internal ledger. The things she knew, the things she was still deciding. At the end of the 2 hours, Agent Carver closed her folder and looked at both of them. "The document goes into evidence," she said. "I'll need a formal statement from Ms. Carter about the circumstances of its discovery. The chain of custody matters. A judge is going to want to know exactly how this came to exist and how it came to be in this room." She looked at Lena. "Are you prepared for that?" "Yes." "It may require a deposition. It may require you to be available for additional questions over the next several weeks as we move this into the formal case structure." "I understand. And you need to understand." Agent Carver's voice shifted slightly, became more precise, the voice she probably used when she needed someone to genuinely hear what she was saying. "Vincent Stahl is going to know that something has shifted. We can move quickly, but there's going to be a window between now and the moment he no longer has the operational freedom to act on what he suspects. During that window, you and your brother need to be careful." Rosa said. "Rosa is right about everything she told you," Agent Carver said. "And I'm going to add to it. For the next 2 to 3 weeks, you do not vary your routine in ways that would attract attention. You do not discuss this with anyone outside this room. If anything unusual happens, anyone you don't recognize near your home, near your workplace, anything that feels wrong, you call me directly." She slid a card across the table. "Not my office, my cell." Lena picked up the card. She thought about Marcus. "We don't have anyone else, so whatever it is, we deal with it together." "My brother," she said. "We'll keep eyes on your building," Agent Carver said. "Unobtrusive, but present." "He doesn't know the details." "Does he know enough to be careful?" "Yes." "Then for now that's sufficient." Lena pocketed the card. She looked at the document still on the table, her father's handwriting visible from across the table, even folded closed. "Can I—" She stopped. Started again. "Can I have a photocopy before it goes into evidence?" Agent Carver looked at her for a moment. Then she said, "Yes. I'll have one made before you leave." "Thank you." She looked at Adrian. He was watching her with the same focused attention he'd brought to every conversation they'd had. The quality of attention that she had found initially unsettling and had slowly come to understand was simply how he was built, that he brought everything to what was in front of him, no part of his mind elsewhere. It was a strange quality in a person she had expected to be otherwise. She was still building her understanding of the distance between what she had expected and what he actually was. "Thank you for setting this up," she said. "You set it up," he said. "You had the document. You had the contact. Ms. Carter." There was something in his voice that hadn't been there in earlier conversations, a directness that felt different from his usual directness, less controlled, more exposed. "When this is finished, when Stahl is in federal hands and your father's name is in the record the way it should be. I would like—" He stopped. He seemed to be doing something he didn't often do, which was choosing between several versions of what he wanted to say and not being entirely certain which one was right. "I would like the opportunity to talk with you, not about any of this, about what comes after." Lena looked at him. "What comes after?" she said. "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "Let's get through what comes before." It wasn't a no. She watched him register that it wasn't a no. She was halfway to the elevator when she heard it. Not a loud sound. A shift. A change in the quality of the air in the hallway. The particular way silence rearranged itself when something entered it that shouldn't be there. She had spent enough time in enough difficult situations to trust that feeling in the same way she trusted the smell of smoke or the particular tension in a room where something was about to go wrong. She stopped walking. Behind her, the door to the meeting room was still open. Rosa was visible through it, speaking to Agent Carver. Adrian was standing near the window. In front of her, the elevator bank was empty. But the door to the stairwell at the far end of the hallway was ajar by about 2 inches. And in those 2 inches there was darkness and stillness that was the wrong kind of stillness. Lena turned and walked back to the meeting room at a pace that was fast without being a run. "Something's wrong," she said. Every head in the room turned. She didn't second-guess herself. She had stopped in an alley for a stranger because something told her to, and she had been right. She was trusting the same mechanism now. "The stairwell door. It's open. It was closed when I came in." Adrian moved first. Not toward the stairwell, he moved to the window and said something into his phone in a voice too low and too fast for Lena to follow. Rosa was already up, moving to stand between Lena and the door. Agent Carver had one hand inside her jacket. "How many people know about this meeting?" Lena asked. 6, Adrian said. "Our side. 3 on yours. Everyone cleared." "Stahl's people saw me go into your building 2 weeks ago," Lena said. "If they've been watching, they would have had to follow you here this morning." His voice was tight. Which means someone was watching my building," Lena finished. Agent Carver was on her phone now, speaking in short, sharp sentences. Adrian said something to the 2 men who appeared in the doorway. Men Lena hadn't seen since the restaurant. The same particular stillness in their posture, and they moved into the hallway. The room they were in became very small and very loud, with the particular loudness of multiple people managing a situation that was moving fast. Lena stood in the center of it, very still. She thought the document is with Agent Carver. Whatever happens right now, the document is with Agent Carver, and it's in the official case file, and Vincent Stahl cannot reach it anymore. That thought was the most useful thing she had available, so she held it. "Clear." One of Adrian's men from the hallway. "Stairwell was clear. Maintenance, there's a cart in the stairwell door, probably swung open." Lena exhaled. Rosa looked at her. "You okay?" "Yes." "That was good instinct." "I've been told I have good instincts about when to stop and when to move." Agent Carver was ending her call. She looked at Lena with something that had shifted from the professional assessment of the first 30 seconds into something more like recognition. "We should get you out of the building through the parking structure. Different exit than you came in." "Okay." "And, Ms. Carter," Agent Carver paused. "Your instinct in that hallway was right to trust, even when it turns out to be a maintenance cart." "Especially then," Lena said. "The ones that turn out to be nothing teach you to keep trusting the ones that aren't." She picked up the copy of her father's document, the one Agent Carver had made, before the alert, before the hallway, and she put it in her coat pocket, and she went out the way she was told to go. The parking structure was cold and concrete, and her footsteps echoed. Adrian walked beside her. Rosa was 2 steps ahead, phone to her ear. The 2 men from the hallway flanked them at a distance. "You handled that well," Adrian said. "Everyone handled it well," Lena said. "Turns out it was a maintenance cart." The reaction was still right. I'm not in the habit of congratulating myself for things that turn out to be nothing. It wasn't nothing, he said. It was a test of how you respond under pressure, and now you know. She looked at him sideways. Is that how you frame everything? As useful data. It's how I've learned to frame things that I can't change, he said. The maintenance cart could have been something. If it had been your instinct to come back and say something would have mattered. The outcome doesn't change the quality of the decision. She thought about that. She thought it was probably a habit of mine that came from living a life where a lot of things that could have been something had actually been something, and where the calculus of decisions and outcomes had very high stakes. Rosa says you've run this operation since you were 26, she said. 25, he said. My father died younger than he planned to. How old are you now? 38. 13 years. She thought about 13 years of being the person responsible for everything, of having everyone around you either wanting something from you or afraid of you, of conducting your entire life in the language of power and leverage and calculated trust. She thought about the alley. His voice telling her, don't call anyone, the instruction of a man who had learned that needing help had costs. When I found you, she said, you told me not to call anyone. Yes. First instinct. Someone's bleeding out and the first instinct is still don't let anyone see you need help. He was quiet for a moment. It's reflex, he said. By 38, it's reflex. That's a hard way to live. It's the only way I knew. She looked at the concrete floor of the parking structure, their footsteps keeping time. My father used to say that the most dangerous thing a person could do was decide they were done needing people. She paused. He said it usually came from getting hurt enough times that needing felt like a liability. Adrian didn't say anything for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, quieter, with less of the controlled quality, more like the voice of someone speaking from a place they didn't usually speak from. Your father sounds like he understood things that took me considerably longer to arrive at. He was that kind of person, Lena said. He understood the important things, and he was wrong about almost nothing that mattered. They reached the car Rosa had indicated. One of Adrian's men held the door. Lena stopped before she got in. She turned to look at Adrian in the concrete quiet of the parking structure, with Rosa on her phone 12 feet away, and the city above them going about its ordinary business, completely unaware of what was sitting in an evidence folder on a federal agent's table 14 floors above their heads. When this is over, she said. He looked at her. When this is actually completely finally over, Stahl in custody, my father's record corrected my brother and I back to our lives. I want you to tell me something. What? Something true, she said. About yourself, not about the situation or the operation or what happened to my father. Something true about who you actually are when none of this is the context. He held her gaze for a long moment. I don't know, he said, if I know the answer to that yet. Then that's something else we have to get through first, she said. She got in the car. The call came 6 days later. She was at the bakery 7:40 in the evening, 40 minutes before close, when her phone buzzed with Agent Carver's cell number. She went to the back room and answered. We moved today, Agent Carver said. Federal warrants executed at 2 locations. Stahl is in custody. Lena sat down on the step stool she used to reach the high shelves. It happened fast, she said. Your father's documentation accelerated the timeline significantly. We were able to close gaps that would have taken another 6 months otherwise. Agent Carver paused. He's in federal holding. His people, the ones connected to Harmon Consulting, are being processed. It's going to be a complicated few weeks legally, but the structural case is solid. And the document, my father's document, it's in the official case file. His name is in there the right way, Ms. Carter, as the source of key evidence that contributed to a significant federal case. Another pause shorter. Not as a traitor. Lena pressed her hand flat on her knee. She was doing that thing her body did, going very still when the thing was very large. She thought about her father. She thought about the Tuesday he came over and hung the photograph. She thought about his handwriting on the cardstock. For when it matters. It mattered. "Thank you," she said. "Thank your father," Agent Carver said. "He did the work." She hung up and sat in the back room of the bakery for a while. The timer on the ovens was ticking. The front of the shop was quiet. The last customer had left 20 minutes ago. The other employee had already clocked out. It was just Lena and the ticking, and the particular weight of something that had been sitting on her chest for 6 years, lifting so suddenly that she felt the absence of it like a physical shift. She called Marcus. He picked up on the second ring, already alert, because that was Marcus, 17 years old, and already carrying the attention of someone who understood that calls at certain times of day meant something. "It's done," she said. "Stahl's in custody. Dad's name is in the record." A silence. Then, "Are you serious?" "Yes." "Lena, I know. He's in federal holding." Another silence longer, and she heard in it every version of the conversation they'd had over the years. Every time she'd said she believed their father, and Marcus had said he believed it too, and neither of them had been able to do anything but carry it. She heard all 6 years in that silence, and she didn't try to fill it. "Dad would—" Marcus started. His voice broke on the second word. He stopped, started again differently. "He'd be—" "Yeah," Lena said softly. "He would." She heard him pull in a breath. She heard him getting himself back together with the particular determination of someone who had decided he was going to hold it together and meant it. "Come home," he said. "Closing up now," she said. "I'll be there." She hung up and sat for one more minute. She let herself feel the full weight of it, not the relief which would come later and keep coming, but the thing underneath the relief. The grief that had been waiting behind the anger and the determination for 6 years. The grief for her father, who had done everything right and paid everything wrong, who had hidden truth in a photograph of a stuffed bear and a summer fair laugh, and trusted that someone would find it when it mattered. She found it Dad. She carried it to the right table. She watched it do what he had always intended it to do. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, stood up, turned off the ovens, and went home. "Chen," Rosa called the next morning. "Adrian wants to see you," she said. "Not about the case, not about Stahl. He said to tell you he knows the answer to your question." Lena stood in her kitchen with her coffee and the October light coming in sideways. The particular October light that was thin and golden, and only lasted for about 20 minutes before it became just regular morning. She thought about the parking structure. Something true. About who you actually are when none of this is the context. And him saying, "I don't know if I know the answer to that yet." "Tell him I'll come on Saturday," she said. Just like that. Just like that. "You're not afraid of him anymore," Rosa said. "I was never afraid of him," Lena said. "I was afraid of what knowing him would cost." Those are different things. A brief silence on Rosa's end. The silence of someone reassessing something. "Yes," Rosa said. "They are." After she hung up, she sat at the kitchen table and thought about cost. About what knowing someone cost and what not knowing them cost, and how those calculations worked when the person in question was someone she had found bleeding in an alley on a Tuesday night and chosen to stay for. She had stayed. She was still staying. Not because she owed him anything. Not because she was afraid. Not because the situation required it. She was staying because she had looked into the eyes of a man who had spent 13 years building walls instead of windows. And she had seen in an alley with his blood on her coat. In a moment when he had nothing left to perform, she had seen a person who was trying to remember how to be one. And Lena Carter, who had spent her whole life walking toward the things that needed to be walked toward, was not someone who could turn away from that. Marcus came out of his bedroom at 7:30, saw her face, and poured himself cereal. "You're going to go see him," he said. "Morelli. Saturday. Is that smart?" "Probably not," she said honestly. Marcus thought about this. He chewed his cereal. He looked at her with their father's eyes. Is it right? She considered the question the way she gave it the seriousness it deserved. I think so, she said. Yeah, I think it is. He nodded the nod of a 17-year-old who had decided to trust his sister's judgment, even when it made him nervous, which was its own kind of courage. Okay, he said, but if it goes wrong, it's not going to go wrong. But if it does, then you can say I told you so for the rest of my life, she said. Deal. He pointed his spoon at her. Deal, she smiled. Outside, the October light had finished its 20-minute window and become regular morning, and the city had fully started up around them. And somewhere in a federal holding facility, a man named Vincent Stahl was beginning to understand that the thing he had spent 10 years hunting had been found by a young woman who worked at a bakery and fixed long division with 12-year-olds on Tuesday evenings. And somewhere across the city, in a room that Lena had not yet seen, Adrian Morelli was sitting with the answer to a question she had asked him in a parking structure, working out how to say it to someone who deserved the truth without the performance. And in the kitchen of an apartment on the north side, Lena Carter finished her coffee and began her day. She had learned over 24 years that most significant things happen this way, not with noise and revelation, but in the ordinary hours, in the quiet between moments, in the accumulating weight of choices made in the direction of what was right. Her father had known that. Now, the world was going to know it too. Saturday came the way significant days always came, looking exactly like any other day, until you were already inside it. Lena wore the same coat she'd worn to the first meeting, not the good one she saved for job interviews. The regular one, the one she'd grabbed without thinking on a Tuesday night when she heard a sound in an alley and stopped walking. She noticed the choice only after she'd already made it standing at the door of her apartment with her keys in her hand. She thought about changing. Then she thought about why she'd reached for this coat instead of the other one, and she left it on. Marcus was at a friend's house. She had not elaborated on where she was going, and he had not asked which was its own kind of communication. Before she left, he had looked up from his phone and said simply, "Text me when you're there." And she had said she would, and that was enough. Rosa sent the address at 9:15. Different building from the one she'd been to before. Not a medical facility this time, not an office. A private residence, the kind of address that existed in Chicago in certain zip codes, and meant something specific about the kind of money that didn't need to announce itself. She took the train and then walked 6 blocks because she needed the time and the movement and the particular clarity that came from putting one foot in front of the other with a destination in mind. She texted Marcus when she arrived. He sent back a single thumbs up. The man who opened the door was not one of the two she recognized from previous encounters. He was older, 50s maybe, with the kind of face that had seen considerable weather and kept its own counsel about it. He said her name, she confirmed it, and he led her through a hallway and into a room that was not what she expected. She had expected something that looked like power. Something that announced itself. The room had books on 3 walls, actual books with worn spines, not decorative ones. A desk that was clearly used papers, 2 open folders, a coffee cup that had left a ring on the surface because nobody had put a coaster under it. A window. 2 chairs not positioned like an office meeting, positioned like a conversation. Adrian was standing when she came in. He didn't come around the desk. He simply turned from the window and looked at her and said, "Thank you for coming." "You said you had an answer," Lena said. "I do." He gestured to the chairs. "Sit down." She sat. He sat. Between them, the ordinary distance of 2 chairs angled toward each other, and outside the window, the city doing what it always did, which was continue regardless of what was happening in any given room. "You asked me something in a parking structure," he said. "Something true, about who I am when none of this is the context." "I remember. I've been thinking about it for 6 days. He looked at her directly, the way he always looked at her, that complete unguarded attention that she had come to recognize as one of the things that was genuinely his, not performed, not calculated. The honest answer is that I'm not sure anyone has ever asked me that before, which is its own kind of answer. "It is," she said. I grew up in a version of this world where who you were was entirely defined by what you controlled. His voice had the quality it got when he was being precise, careful about the words, in the specific way of someone who had learned that words had consequences. My father was that kind of man. His father was. I inherited a business, and a reputation, and an entire identity built around the idea that strength was demonstrated by what you could make happen, what you could prevent, what you could take and hold. He paused. I was good at all of it. I was very good at all of it. And it took me until a Tuesday night in an alley to understand that being very good at something can also be a very efficient way of disappearing. Lena didn't say anything. She had learned that he needed space when he was saying things from the deep part of himself that filling the space prematurely stopped the real thing from coming out. When I opened my eyes in that alley, he said, and I saw your face. You weren't afraid. Everyone around me for 13 years has been either afraid of me or dependent on me or maneuvering around me. You were just present. You were there because a human being needed help, and you were the person standing there. He held her gaze, and I thought I don't know the last time I was present for something without calculating what it cost. How long ago was that? She asked quietly. Longer than I want to say out loud. She looked at him. At the books on the walls, the ring from the coffee cup, the papers on the desk. At the particular way he held himself when he wasn't performing anything slightly less controlled, slightly more like a person just existing in their own skin. The true thing, she said. The thing you found in 6 days. Yes. He set his hands flat on his knees, a gesture she recognized as his version of settling into something difficult. I've been running this operation since I was 25. I've made decisions in that time that I can defend, and decisions I can't. I've been loyal to the wrong people, and failed people who deserved better. And I've known for years that the version of myself that this role created was not the whole version. He paused. What I didn't know was what to do with that understanding. You can't run a complex operation with visible fault lines. The performance has to be consistent. And then a woman I'd never met stayed in an alley with me for 11 minutes and talked about the wind on Michigan Avenue and kept a coat pressed against my side with steady hands. Something shifted in his expression. Something that was not his usual controlled quality. Something more like the particular vulnerability of a person who has decided to say the thing they've been holding. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not because you saved my life, because you were so completely yourself in a moment when most people perform something. You were just you. And I realized I hadn't been just me in a very long time. Lena was quiet for a moment. Who is just you? She asked. When you strip away the operation and the reputation and the role. He thought about this, genuinely thought about it. She could see him working through it, and she respected that he didn't reach for the easy answer. Someone who reads too much history, he said finally. Someone who started every conversation with my father by arguing with him, and ended every conversation wishing I'd listen more. Someone who is better at understanding other people's needs than asking for my own. He paused. Someone who made a serious miscalculation about Daniel Carter and has to carry that. You carry it like it defines you, she said. Doesn't it? No. Her voice was clear and direct. What you did with it defines you. You could have buried it. You found out 4 months ago, and you could have kept it buried and protected the version of the story that was easier for you. You didn't. It took me 4 months. People take longer than 4 months to tell the truth about much smaller things. He looked at her with something in his face that she didn't have a word for. Yet something that was somewhere between gratitude and the particular emotion of being seen in a way you didn't expect to be seen. Your father, he said. He trusted people in a world that punished it. And then you, same world, same people, same costs, and you still trusted. How? Lena thought about her father at the kitchen table. About Marcus with his chemistry textbook. About the feeling she'd had in the alley when she heard the sound and stopped walking. The feeling that was less about calculation and more about something that functioned at a level below thought. "I don't know that it's trust exactly," she said. "I think it's just I can't stand waste. My father called it that. He said watching someone suffer when you had the ability to help and chose not to was a kind of waste that compounded that it became part of you. He said people who kept walking were carrying the weight of all their kept walking by the time they got old." She paused. "I don't know if he was right about everything, but I think he was right about that." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "He was right about that," he said. They sat in those chairs for 2 hours, not talking about the case, not about Stahl, not about federal channels, not about the operation or the history or the documentation. Talking about other things. Talking about his father, who had been a precise and demanding man who expressed love entirely in terms of expectation, and who had died at 57, leaving Adrian holding a structure he'd been trained to manage but never trained to question. Talking about her mother, who had left when Lena was 11 and Marcus was 4, not in a dramatic way, not in a way that could be assigned clear blame to anyone, just in the quiet way that sometimes happened when two people who had once fit each other no longer did, and the leaving had been its own kind of lesson in impermanence. Talking about Marcus and the particular responsibility of being the person standing between a younger sibling and the world. Talking about what Lena wanted to be the social work program she'd been doing, one credit at a time. The specific dream of working with families in crisis. The communities she'd already been serving for 3 years without the credential to formalize it. He listened to all of it. Not the listening of someone waiting for their turn. The actual kind. She noticed that. She noticed it went in the ledger. At some point, Rosa appeared with coffee and left again without saying anything, with the efficiency of someone who understood exactly what kind of room she'd walked into and exactly how long to stay in it. "The communities you work with," Adrian said. "The families affected by violence. The programs at the center on Ashland. What about them? They're chronically underfunded. I've looked at the numbers. The center runs on grants that are inconsistent and a volunteer base that has significant turnover." "I know that," she said. "I've been watching it struggle for 3 years. I want to change that," he said. Lena set her coffee down. Not as a transaction," he said. And there was the word again. The word they both kept circling the boundary they'd been holding since the beginning. "Not as a payment for anything. I have resources, and I have been using those resources primarily to maintain a structure that has caused as much harm as it's prevented. I want to use them differently." He looked at her steadily. "I want to fund the center. The homework program, the family crisis services, the community outreach. Properly. Sustainably. Without the center having to write a new grant application every 6 months to keep the lights on." Lena looked at him for a long moment. "Why are you telling me?" she said. "You don't need my permission." "No," he said. "But I needed you to know that it's not about you. It's not about whatever this is between us that neither of us has named yet. It's about what those communities need, and what I can give, and what I should have been doing differently for a long time." He paused. "And I'm telling you because you work there. Because those kids you're helping with long division on Tuesday nights deserve better than what they've been getting. And I want you to know it's coming regardless of everything else." Lena thought about destiny and her long division. Thought about the water-stained ceiling of the homework room and the grant paperwork she'd watched the director wrestle with every quarter. "The center director is named Patricia Okafor," she said. "She's been running that place for 12 years on nothing and determination." "I'll contact her directly," he said. "No intermediaries, no strings, just resources." "She'll ask questions." "She should ask questions. I'll answer them." "She's not going to be impressed by your name." "Good." Something in his voice said he meant it. "I don't want her to be impressed by my name. I want her to have what she needs." Lena was quiet for a moment. She thought about the distance between who she had expected Adrian Morelli to be and who she was sitting across from. She had been maintaining that ledger since the beginning. The thing she knew, the thing she was deciding, and she realized now that the deciding was largely done, had been done in pieces over the past weeks without her consciously marking the moment. "The answer you said you found," she said. "In 6 days." "Yes. Is that it? The center, the communities, the using resources differently?" "That's part of it," he said. "The operational part." He held her gaze. "The other part is harder to say." "Say it anyway." He looked at her with that expression that had no name, yet the one that was somewhere between gratitude and being seen. "I want to learn how to be present again," he said. "The way you are, the way your father was, the way of showing up for what's in front of you without calculating what it costs. I don't know how to do that yet. I've been calculating for 13 years. It's built into the way I think." He paused. "But I want to learn. And I think—" He stopped. Started again. "I think being around someone who does it naturally might be the closest thing to a teacher I'm going to find." Lena looked at him. She thought about what it cost someone like this to say something like that. She understood it was not a small thing, not a performance, not maneuvering. She had become good at reading the difference. "I'm not a project," she said. "I know that. I'm not a teacher either technically. I'm a bakery worker who's 3 credits away from starting the actual social work program. I know that too. And I'm not interested in being anyone's—" She paused, choosing the word carefully. "Redemption arc. That's not what I'm asking you to be." He said it quickly and clearly, no hesitation. "I'm not asking you to be anything. I'm telling you who I'm trying to become, and I'm telling you that you are one of the reasons I've started trying to become it. You don't have to do anything with that information." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay. Okay. Okay, I heard you." She picked up her coffee. "And I'm not going anywhere," which is not a commitment, and not a promise, and not something you should read too much into. It's just, I stopped walking in an alley on a Tuesday, and I'm not the kind of person who starts walking away once I've stopped. He looked at her with something that was, she thought, the first entirely unguarded expression she had seen on his face. "No," he said. "You're not." Tag. She was putting on her coat to leave when Rosa appeared in the doorway. Lena had already noticed in the weeks of knowing Rosa Luca that Rosa's entrances were calibrated, that she appeared when something needed to be said that wasn't going to be easy, and that the expression she wore when she appeared for those reasons was specific and identifiable. She wore it now. "There's a problem," Rosa said. Lena's coat was half on. She left it that way. Adrian looked at Rosa. "Tell me." "Stahl's attorney filed an emergency motion this morning." Rosa stepped into the room fully the way she moved when the information was bad enough that proximity to the people receiving it mattered. "He's claiming that the Daniel Carter documentation was obtained under duress, that Lena was coerced into producing it by threats against her brother." Lena's coat was fully on now. She didn't remember finishing putting it on. "That's not true. I know that," Rosa said. "Agent Carver knows that. The problem is that it introduces a question about the chain of custody that Stahl's people are going to exploit. The document is still in evidence, they can't get it out. But if the acquisition is successfully challenged, the case timeline shifts significantly." "How significantly?" Adrian asked. Carver said potentially 6 to 8 months. Adrian's expression didn't change. The stillness that came over his face when he was processing something large had a specific quality she had learned to recognize. Not blankness, but the particular concentration of all his focus inward, everything being reassessed at once. "He's claiming Marcus was threatened," Lena said. Her voice was level. She was assembling the situation with the same steady attention she brought to everything, the same mechanic her father had passed to her. "Which means Stahl's people have been watching us long enough to know Marcus exists." "Yes," Rosa said. "Which means the 6-day window after the warrant was executed wasn't clean." "We're working on confirming that." Lena looked at Adrian. He was looking at her. Between them, a shared understanding of what this meant, not just the legal delay, not just the tactical problem, but the specific chill of knowing that someone with resources and no remaining compunction about consequences still had eyes on her family. "Marcus," she said. Already covered, Rosa said immediately. 2 of our people are at his friend's house right now. He's not alone. Does he know? He knows there's a precautionary measure, not the details. Lena nodded. She was doing what she did under pressure, which was going very still and very focused, moving through the information in order. The chain of custody question, she said. What does Carver need? A corroborating witness, Rosa said. Someone who can attest to the circumstances under which you discovered the document and produced it voluntarily. Someone outside the operation who was present or directly informed, Lena thought. She thought about the timeline. The coffee shop where she'd spread the documents on the table, the restaurant back corner with Rosa, the meeting with Agent Carver. She thought about the community center on Ashland and a woman in a plastic chair by the front door. Rosa was with me in the community center parking lot when I realized the photograph might contain something, she said. She can attest to that conversation, that I came to the understanding myself without pressure. I can, Rosa said. That's helpful, but Stahl's attorney is going to argue that I'm compromised by my connection to Adrian. Then we need someone else, Lena said. Someone with no connection to any of this. She paused. There was a woman at the community center that evening, one of the administrators. She was doing paperwork at the far end of the room when Rosa came in. She didn't hear the conversation, but she saw us. She can attest that the interaction looked voluntary, that Rosa didn't approach me with anything threatening, that I got up and left under my own power. She looked at Adrian. He was already looking at her with that complete attention. Can you get a statement like that admitted? She asked. Carver can, he said, if the witness is credible and independent. Her name is Claudette Morris, Lena said. She's been at that center for 8 years. She has no connection to you, to Stahl, or to any of this. She saw exactly what happened, and she'll say exactly what happened, because that's the kind of person she is. She paused. I'll call her. Adrian looked at Rosa. Get Carver on the phone. Rosa already had her phone out. In the next 40 minutes, Lena sat back down in the chair she'd been sitting in for 2 hours of quiet conversation, and shifted entirely into the different mode. She also possessed the mode that was clear and fast and moved through problems with the efficiency of someone who had been solving hard things since they were 14 years old. She called Claudette Morris, who answered on the 3rd ring and listened without interrupting, and said, Honey, of course I'll tell them what I saw. You come to that center 3 evenings a week, and I've never seen you do a single thing that wasn't exactly what you said it was. Lena thanked her and said she'd have someone call with the formal details. She called Marcus next. There are people near you right now, she said. It's precautionary. Don't argue with me about it. A beat. Is it Morelli's people? Yes. Are they the reason I can't be alone right now, or are they something I need to be worried about? They're protection, not threat. I promise. Another beat. Okay. Stay with Jamie's family until I call you. Lena! I know. I'm handling it. Just stay. Okay, he said. But when this is over, when it's over, I'll tell you everything. Including the part about Morelli. Including that. A short silence. He's not what I expected, Marcus said quietly. No, she said. He isn't. She hung up and turned back to the room where Adrian and Rosa were both on phones, and the particular energy of people managing a crisis they were practiced at managing. And she sat in the chair and waited, because she had done what she could do in the immediate moment, and waiting was its own kind of action. Carver called back in 22 minutes. She spoke to Adrian first, then asked Rosa to put Lena on. Claudette Morris, Carver said. Tell me about her, Lena told her. She was precise 8 years at the center administrator role, consistent, and documented no connection to the Morelli operation, or to Stahl, or to any of the players in the case. Carver listened and asked 2 follow-up questions, and then said, I'm going to call her today. If she's as straightforward as you're describing this, dents the duress argument significantly. It happened exactly the way Rosa and I described it, Lena said. I made the connection about the photograph myself. No one pressured me. No one threatened Marcus. I walked out of that community center on my own feet, and I went home and opened a photograph frame because I chose to. I know that, Carver said. I'm not questioning you. I'm building the record that makes the questioning of you impossible. She paused. You understand the difference. I do. Good. Another pause, shorter. Ms. Carter, I want you to know something. In 20 years of federal work, the case that gets made because of your father's documentation is going to be one of the 3 or 4 that actually changes things, not just for Stahl. His entire network. The shell structure, the routing, the way he's been moving money through legitimate operations for 15 years. Your father found the route. Everything we've been doing for 3 years has been working with branches. A beat. He deserved better than what he got. Lena pressed her fingers flat on her knee. Yes, she said. He did. We're going to make sure this sticks, Carver said. The motion isn't going to work. I want you to hear that from me directly. Thank you. Call me if anything happens. Anything at all. She hung up. Adrian was watching her. Rosa had stepped out. Carver's confident, Lena said. She's usually right when she's confident, he said. Good. She let out a breath. Not a dramatic one. Just the breath you let out when you've been holding something for 20 minutes and the immediate crisis has passed the boiling point and settled back into something manageable. I need to get to Marcus. I'll have someone drive you. I'll take the train. Lena? He said her name the way you said a name when you wanted a person to actually hear what came next. Let me do this one thing. It's practical. It's safe. Let me. She looked at him. She thought about the conversation they'd had for 2 hours. The books on the walls. The coffee ring on the desk. The particular unguarded expression she didn't have a name for yet. She thought about the fact that letting someone do one thing was not the same as letting them do everything, and that she had never been afraid of accepting help. She had only been afraid of accepting it from people who would use the accepting as leverage. This was not that. Okay, she said. He nodded, reached for his phone. Adrian. She waited until he looked up. The center. Patricia Okafor. Call her next week. Don't wait. Something moved through his expression. I won't wait, he said. The drive to Jamie's house was 15 minutes. She sat in the back of the car and looked out the window at the city going by, and she let herself be in the middle of the moment without trying to resolve it yet. That was something her father had taught her too, that the middle of things was not a problem to be solved. It was a place to be in, and that people who couldn't tolerate being in the middle of things ended up rushing toward resolutions that weren't ready yet. She was in the middle of something she didn't have a full name for. She thought about 2 hours in chairs angled toward each other, talking about history books and absent mothers, and the wind on Michigan Avenue, and what it cost to keep walking past things that needed you to stop. She thought about Adrian's face saying, I want to learn how to be present again, and the fact that he had said it without looking for what it would cost him. She thought about her father, who had trusted the right things at the wrong time, who had built truth out of account numbers and routing codes and hidden it in a summer fair photograph, and waited for someone to find it when it mattered. She thought it mattered, Dad. You can rest now. The car stopped. She got out. She thanked the driver and she went in, and Marcus was in Jamie's living room, and he stood up when she walked in, and she crossed the room, and she hugged her brother the way you hug someone when you've both been carrying something heavy and you're ready to set it down together. He held on for a moment. Then he pulled back and looked at her face. It's going to be okay, he said. Not a question. Yes, she said. It's going to be okay. And Dad was right, she said, and everybody's going to know it. Marcus looked at the ceiling in the particular way he did when he was keeping something in, then looked back at her with their father's eyes steady, patient, refusing to be fooled by anything that wasn't real. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. She sat down beside him and she let the afternoon settle around them. And outside the window, the city continued its indifferent, beautiful momentum, And somewhere across town, in a room full of books and one unguarded conversation, a man was making a phone call to a federal agent and beginning in the careful way of someone who had been very good at the wrong things for a very long time to practice being good at something different. It was not a small thing what was happening. It was not finished yet either. But Lena Carter, daughter of Daniel Carter, who had stopped in an alley on a Tuesday night because someone needed help and she was the person standing there, had never once needed things to be finished, to believe they were worth seeing through. She was still there. She intended to stay. The motion failed. Carver called on a Tuesday morning, which Lena thought was appropriate. Tuesdays had become the day when things happened, when things shifted, when the universe apparently decided to move its furniture around. She was at the bakery an hour before her shift started, eating a roll she'd pulled from the morning batch and reading through her social work program application for the fourth time when the phone rang. "The judge denied it," Carver said. "Chain of custody stands. The documentation is fully admissible. Claudette Morris's statement was exactly what we needed. Clean, credible, completely independent." Stahl's attorney tried to cross-examine her characterization of the interaction, and she looked at him and said, and I'm quoting directly, "Young man, I've been watching people come and go through that center for 8 years, and I know the difference between someone being pressured and someone making up their own mind. That young woman walked in there and walked out of there on her own 2 feet, and there wasn't a single thing about it that looked like anything other than exactly what it was." The judge moved on. Lena set down the roll. "Claudette said young man to a federal attorney," she said. "She did. He's 43. Carver's voice had something in it that Lena had not heard before, a warmth that sat underneath the professional precision, something that came out when the professional precision had just won something worth winning. "The full case goes to trial in 60 days. We're not anticipating significant obstacles at this point. The documentation is too solid, the shell structure is too thoroughly documented, and Stahl's defense is essentially arguing around a wall that has no doors in it." 60 days, Lena said. "Give or take. There may be a plea before it gets that far. That sometimes happens when people look at what's on the other side of the wall." A pause. "Either way, Ms. Carter, it's going. Your father's work is doing what he built it to do." After she hung up, Lena sat with the phone in her hand and the morning light coming in through the bakery window, and she let herself feel the particular feeling that had no clean name, not quite joy, not quite grief, the specific emotion that lived in the space where those two things dissolved into each other. She thought about her father. She thought about him at 29 building a case out of handwritten numbers and routing codes, and 2 years of careful, dangerous patience in a world that was designed to punish exactly that kind of patience. He had been right. The world was finally saying so. She called Marcus. He was in class, so she texted motion denied. Case proceeds. Dad wins. She watched the 3 dots appear and disappear twice, and then his reply came, a single line that said, "I'm in AP history right now, and I'm trying not to cry in front of 17 people." She sent him back, "Dad would have found that very funny." And Marcus sent, "Yeah, he would have." And that was enough. She put her phone in her pocket and she went to work. She called Adrian that evening. She had his number now, not through Rosa, not through an intermediary. Just his number, the way people had each other's numbers when they had become something that required a direct line. She had saved it in her phone under his first name, which felt like its own small declaration of something. He picked up on the second ring. "I heard," he said. "Carver called me an hour ago." "How does it feel?" she asked. A pause. Not long, just enough. "Different from how I expected it to feel," he said. "I thought it would feel like winning something. It doesn't feel like that." "What does it feel like?" "Like something being corrected," he said. "Like a ledger being brought into balance." He paused again. "Like something I owed being paid." "But that's not quite right either, because what I owed can't actually be paid. Your father is he's still gone. The correction doesn't undo the years." "No," she said. "It doesn't." "Does it help?" he asked. "The correction, the case, knowing it's going through. Does it actually help?" She thought about this seriously, the way he'd learned she thought about things she wanted to answer honestly. Yes, she said. It helps in the specific way that truth always helps, which is that it doesn't change what happened, but it changes the shape of what happened. My father's story has a different shape now. He's not the man who failed. He's the man who built the thing that brought Stahl down 10 years after they destroyed him for building it. She paused. That matters. It matters to me, and it matters to Marcus, and it matters to... I think it matters to the world in some way, even if the world doesn't know the specific details. The shape of a true thing in the world is different from the shape of a false thing, even when nobody can see it directly. He was quiet for a moment. Your father taught you that, he said. Yeah. He was a remarkable man. He was an ordinary man, she said. That's the point. He was an absolutely ordinary man who chose to do the right thing under conditions designed to make the right thing impossible. That's not remarkable. That's just a person being who they decided to be. Most people don't manage it. Most people don't try, she said. Those are different failures. She heard him exhale, the particular sound of someone releasing something they'd been holding. Patricia Okafor, he said. I called her last week. Lena straightened. She had been leaning against the kitchen counter, and she straightened. And she asked me 17 questions. 17. I counted. There was something in his voice she hadn't heard before, something that was nearly amusement, but was warmer than amusement, something closer to the particular warmth of being genuinely surprised by a person. She asked about the source of the funding, the structure, the terms, what I expected in return, whether there were conditions attached, what my connection to the community was, whether I had ever set foot in that neighborhood before, and what I thought the word investment meant in the context of social services versus in the context of financial return. What did you say? I told her that I had no conditions, no expectations of return, no prior connection to the neighborhood that was positive in nature, and that I was aware the word investment was the wrong word, and that I was looking for the right one and hadn't found it yet. He paused. She said she appreciated the honesty about not having found it yet. She said most people in my position had already decided what word they were using before they picked up the phone. She's not wrong. No, she's entirely right. His voice settled into the thoughtful register that she'd come to recognize. She agreed to meet, in person at the center. She said she doesn't make funding decisions based on phone calls from people she's never looked in the eye. When? Thursday. How do you feel about that? Nervous, he said immediately without hesitation, and she could hear that the immediacy surprised him slightly, that the word came out before he'd had a chance to calibrate it. Good, she said. Good. It means you understand what's actually at stake. She paused. Patricia Okafor doesn't need to be impressed by your name. She needs to believe you're serious about her community. Those are two completely different conversations. I know. Do you know how to have the second one? A pause. I'm learning, he said. Yeah, she said. You are. 3 weeks passed. The case moved through its procedural paces with the particular momentum of federal machinery that had been given solid fuel. Lena gave her formal deposition on a Wednesday afternoon in a room with Agent Carver and 2 other people whose roles she understood in the abstract and didn't need to understand in detail. She answered every question directly and completely and without embellishment, and when it was done, Carver walked her out and said, "You're done with the hardest part." "What's the easy part?" Lena asked. "Waiting," Carver said. "I'm not sure that's easier." "No," Carver said, "but it requires less of you." Stahl's attorney attempted 2 more motions in the 3 weeks. Both failed. The case record by this point was dense enough that the attempts looked less like legal strategy and more like a man throwing things at a wall, and the wall was concrete. Carver said so not in those words, but in the tone she used when she reported each failure, the tone of someone watching an inevitable conclusion arrive on schedule. Marcus started his senior year. He was taking AP History, AP Chemistry, and an elective in urban planning that he'd chosen because he'd been reading about city infrastructure and had opinions about it. He was also quietly beginning to talk about college, not in the abstract way he'd talked about it before, but in the specific way that meant he'd been doing research. He'd been looking at programs in public policy. He'd been looking at schools that had strong urban studies departments. One evening, he set his laptop on the kitchen table, turned it toward Lena, and said, "This one has a full scholarship for first-generation students who demonstrate community impact." He pointed at his own volunteer hours at the center. His grades, the letter of recommendation he'd already quietly obtained from Patricia Okafor. "I've been building toward this for 2 years," he said. "I just didn't want to say anything until I knew it was real." Lena looked at the screen. Then she looked at her brother, at the particular steadiness of him, the deliberate patience of a 17-year-old who had been building something in silence, because he understood that some things needed to be solid before you showed them to the people who mattered. "Dad's kid," she said. Marcus nodded. His jaw did the thing. "Yeah," he said. She helped him with the application essay that night. It was about their father, about what he had built and what it had cost and what it meant to carry a story forward when the person who started it couldn't finish it. She suggested very few changes. It didn't need many. Adrian came to the community center on a Thursday afternoon in the 3rd week, and he came alone. Lena knew he was going because he had told her the meeting was scheduled. She did not offer to come, and he did not ask her to, because they had both understood without discussing it that Patricia Okafor needed to form her own impression of this man without Lena's presence either buffering or vouching. Patricia was not someone who needed help forming impressions. He called her that evening. "How did it go?" she asked. "She walked me through the entire center," he said. "Every room. She explained every program, every gap, everything that wasn't possible because of funding constraints. She introduced me to the kids in the homework room." A pause. "There was a girl named Destiny who was working on algebra." Lena smiled. "I know Destiny." "She looked at me like she was trying to decide if I was trustworthy," he said. "She's 11. She's always done that. She's been doing it since she was 9. She has extremely good instincts." She asked me what I did for work. "What did you say?" "I said I was in the process of figuring that out." A short pause. "She said that was a weird answer for a grown-up." Lena laughed. It was a real one, the kind that came from the place where things were actually funny, rather than the place where you were performing being fine. "What did Patricia say?" she asked. At the end of the meeting, he said, "She looked at me for a long time without saying anything. She does that, I've noticed." "She does." And then she said, "I've had a lot of people walk through that door wanting to put their name on something, or manage something, or attach some condition to their generosity that turns it from a gift into a transaction. I'm not interested in any of those people." His voice carried something she recognized, the quality of being genuinely moved by something that came at you without warning. And then she said, "But you walked through my center, and you looked at the water stain on the ceiling of the homework room, and you looked genuinely pained about it. Not embarrassed, pained. That's the first time that's happened." Lena was quiet for a moment. "She said yes," she asked. "She said yes. Adrian, I know. That's a real thing. That's an actual real thing you just did. I know." His voice was quieter now, with a quality she had come to understand was not weakness, but its opposite, the voice of someone who had stopped performing being unaffected by things that affected them. "I want to do more of it, the real thing. I want—" He stopped. "I've been running an operation that justified itself on the basis of providing structure and protection in places where official systems failed. And there was some truth in that. There are real gaps that real people fall through. But the way I was filling those gaps was a way that created its own gaps. That created its own damage." He paused. "Patricia Okafor is doing the actual work. I want to support the actual work." "You can do that," Lena said. "You have the resources, and now you have Patricia making sure they go where they need to go." "Yes." A beat. "She told me she expects quarterly accountability meetings, in person, at the center. She told you that? She said, and I'm quoting, "Money without presence is just money. I need to know the person attached to it hasn't forgotten what it's for." So apparently I have standing meetings now. Patricia Okafor is going to change your life, Lena said. Something already changed my life, he said quietly. Patricia is going to help me figure out what to do with it. The plea came on a Monday. Carver called at 8 in the morning. Stahl had entered a guilty plea to federal charges of financial fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction, and had agreed to full cooperation with the ongoing investigation into the broader network in exchange for a reduction in sentencing exposure that still meant a minimum of 12 years in federal prison. 12 years. Lena sat in her kitchen and heard Agent Carver say 12 years, and she thought about her father at 46, running out of time in a world that had decided he was something he wasn't. And she thought about 12 years as a number that didn't solve that, and also as a number that was real and true, and meant that Vincent Stahl would spend the next 12 years inside a consequence that her father had built the foundation of in 2013. The Daniel Carter documentation, she said. It's in the record. Permanently, Carver said. It's in the official case record as foundational evidence. His name is attached to it as the source. That is a matter of federal public record now, Ms. Carter. Anybody who wants to know who built this case will find his name. Lena pressed her hand flat on the kitchen table. Thank you, she said, for all of it. Thank your father, Carver said. For the second time. She said it the same way she'd said it the first time, not as deflection, but as the specific kind of credit that meant something because it was true. After she hung up, Lena sat for a while. She sat in the kitchen of the apartment her father had helped her move into when she was 21. The apartment she had built a life in, the apartment where Marcus had grown up on the fold-out couch and then a real bed, and now a room with his own shelves and his own mess and his own ideas about urban planning and public policy. She sat in the kitchen and she let the morning be exactly what it was. Ordinary light, ordinary sounds, the building making its small noises, the city outside doing what cities did. She thought about what her father would say. She thought he would say, "You didn't waste it. You picked it up and you didn't waste it." She thought he might also say, "Now, what are you going to do with the rest?" She smiled. She got up and made coffee, and she called Marcus, who had a free period, and answered immediately, and she told him. She heard him breathing for a moment on the other end of the line. Then he said, 12 years. Yes. And Dad's name is in the record. Permanently. Another breath. Okay, he said. Okay. Good. His voice had the quality of someone who had just set something down that had been very heavy. Are you okay? I'm very okay, she said. Are you? Yeah. He paused. Actually, yeah. Like, actually okay. Me too, she said. Go back to class. Lena. I know, go. She heard him laugh slightly. The real laugh, the one that came from the same place hers did, that came from the same summer fair photograph. Hi, she told Adrian in person. She went to the building with the books and the coffee ring on the desk, and this time she didn't wait to be shown through, she knew the way. And the man who opened the door was the older one with the weathered face, who nodded at her. Now the way people nodded at someone they recognized, someone who belonged in the space. Adrian was at his desk when she came in. Not managing a crisis, not on the phone. Reading. An actual book open on the desk beside the folders, the way the books on his walls had clearly been read, broken spine pages slightly bent at the corners from being carried. He looked up. 12 years, she said. Plea entered this morning. Full cooperation. Dad's name in the federal record permanently. He stood up. He didn't say anything for a moment. He looked at her with that expression that she had come to know well over the weeks, the unguarded one, the one that had no performance in it, the one that was just a person responding to something real. It's over, he said. That part is over, she said. He came around the desk. He stopped a few feet from her with his hands at his sides, and he looked at her the way he'd been looking at her since the alley, like she was something. He was still in the process of understanding, and the process was one he didn't want to rush. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I've owed it for weeks, and I haven't—" "Adrian." "No, I need to say it." His voice was quiet and direct the way it was when he was being completely honest. "I made a decision about your father based on information I should have investigated more thoroughly. I accepted a constructed story because it was easier than the alternative, and that decision contributed to the destruction of a good man's life. I can correct the record. I can fund Patricia Okafor's center. I can spend the next decade doing everything differently. And all of that matters, and none of it makes the specific harm I caused unhappen." He held her gaze. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what happened to your father. I'm sorry it took until now. And I'm sorry you had to carry the wrong story for 6 years before anyone with the resources to change it chose to change it." The room was quiet. She looked at him. She thought about what an apology needed to do, not fix what couldn't be fixed, not undo what couldn't be undone, but acknowledge the specific shape of the harm in a way that said, "I see what this cost. I'm not looking away from it." He was not looking away. "Thank you," she said. That's the right apology. That's exactly the right one." He nodded. "My father would have accepted it," she said. "He believed in apologies that told the truth. He said most people apologized for how something made them feel, rather than for what they actually did." She paused. "You apologized for what you actually did." "I'm going to keep trying to do that," he said. "I know you are." They stood in the room with the books and the light from the window and the ordinary afternoon sounds coming in from outside, and Lena thought about the distance between the alley and this room and everything that had moved through that distance. The documents, the photograph, the parking structure, the community center, Destiny and her algebra, Patricia and her quarterly meetings, Marcus and his college application, Claudette Morris, telling a federal attorney she knew the difference between pressure and a person making up their own mind. She thought about her father building truth out of handwritten numbers in a world that didn't want his truth. She thought about him hiding it in a photograph of a stuffed bear and a laugh she'd forgotten she had. She thought about stopping in an alley on a Tuesday night. "I'm enrolled," she said. Adrian looked at her. "Enrolled. Social work program. Full enrollment starting in January." She said it the way she said things she'd been carrying for a while and was ready to say out loud. "I've been doing it 1 credit at a time for 3 years. I had enough to qualify for full enrollment, and I wasn't pulling the trigger because I was afraid of what happened if I committed to it and it didn't work out." She paused. "I pulled the trigger. Something happened in his face. Something that was, she thought, and she had gotten better at reading him over the weeks, something that was genuinely proud. Not possessive, not conditional. Just proud of a person for doing the thing they'd been building toward." "January," he said. "January." "That's the right thing," he said. "That's exactly the right thing. I know." She paused. "I'm also staying at the center. 3 evenings a week. Patricia said enrollment in the program counts as continuing development for the volunteer role, which means I'm technically more qualified and less paid." "That sounds right." "It does." She looked at him steadily. "And I want whatever this is to keep going." She said it clearly without hedging because she was done hedging about things she'd already decided. Not because of the case or the connection or anything that came before. Because of 2 hours in chairs talking about history books and Michigan Avenue wind and what it means to be present. Because of who you are when none of the rest of it is the context. I want to know more of that person. He was very still. "I'm still figuring out who that person is," he said. "I know." She held his gaze. "I'm interested in the figuring out part, not just the finished version." He looked at her for a long moment. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "Whatever this is. I don't know the right way to—" "Neither do I," she said. "You don't learn how to do something by waiting until you know how. You learn by doing it with someone who's willing to figure it out alongside you. And you're willing. I stopped in an alley for you, she said. I think that tells you something about my willingness. Something crossed his face that was, she thought, the truest version of a smile she'd seen on him, not the controlled acknowledgement of something clever, not the brief shift of expression that served a social function. A real one coming from somewhere deep and genuine, and maybe a little surprised at itself. It does, he said. Good. She picked up her bag from where she'd set it on the chair. I have to get to the center. Destiny has a quiz tomorrow, and she's been texting me about polynomial expressions. She has your number. Patricia thought it was appropriate. I think Destiny asked Patricia, and Patricia didn't want to have that argument. She moved toward the door. Adrian? He looked at her. Saturday, she said. The center is doing a community lunch. Patricia organized it. The whole neighborhood is invited. She paused. You should come. Not as a donor. Not as anyone with a name that means anything. Just come and eat lunch with people and let Destiny give you the assessment she gives everyone. The assessment. She decides within the first 5 minutes whether she trusts someone. She's been right every time I've been able to check. Lena held his gaze. She'll be right about you, too. He looked at her for a moment. What if she decides she doesn't? Then you have something to work on, Lena said. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. She walked out. She went down through the building and out into the afternoon, and the city was doing what it always did, carrying its enormous ordinary life forward, completely unaware that in any given moment something was shifting in it. Some ledger was being corrected. Some truth was finding its permanent place in the record. She thought about her father. She thought about him at the kitchen table when she was 14, telling her that the worst waste was walking past something that needed you. She thought about him standing in her doorway, holding a photograph in a frame he had built himself, saying, "This is so you don't forget what we're fighting for." She thought about his handwriting on a card in the back of a photograph frame, "For when it matters." DC. It had mattered. She had found it. She had carried it to the right table. She had watched it do what he built it to do. And now she was walking out into a Tuesday afternoon in October, with a social work enrollment in January, and 3 evenings a week at a center that was finally going to have the resources it needed, and a 17-year-old brother who was going to change the shape of cities someday, and a man across town who was slowly, deliberately, imperfectly learning to be present for things in a world that had only ever taught him to control them. She thought this is what it looks like when a true thing takes root. Not a dramatic ending, not a ceremony. Just life continuing, shaped differently by the truth now living inside it. She pulled her coat tighter and walked toward the train. And the October air was the kind that required you to carry warmth inside yourself, because the city wasn't going to offer it freely. And Lena Carter, daughter of Daniel Carter, who had never once walked past something that needed her to stop, was carrying plenty. She had always known how to do that. She had just never known until now how far it would take her. She knew now. She kept walking,